"You're not good enough," the principal sneered as he banned a single mom from helping, only for the shocked crowd to learn the entire school stood on the money she had secretly given. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she guided her weathered Honda Civic away from Meadowbrook Elementary. The morning sun felt too bright, almost mocking, as it streamed through the windshield. Her chest ached with a familiar tightness, the same feeling she'd had years ago when she'd first faced life without Michael. The plate of cookies sat untouched on the passenger seat, still warm through the red and white checkered cloth she'd so carefully wrapped them in. She'd woken up early to bake them, filling their small kitchen with the comforting scent of vanilla and chocolate chips. Now each cookie felt like a reminder of her foolishness. Principal Edwards' words echoed in her mind. "We don't need unqualified people like you." His steel gray eyes had swept over her simple dress and sensible shoes with such obvious disdain. The other parents in the office, with their designer handbags and perfectly styled hair, had shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. From the back seat came Lily's sweet voice, humming the tune of her favorite song from music class. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror, catching sight of her daughter's dark curls bouncing as she swayed to her own melody. Lily's face was peaceful, innocent. She hadn't noticed the exchange in the office, too busy examining the colorful fall festival posters on the wall. Sarah's vision blurred with tears, and she blinked hard to clear them. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. The stoplight ahead turned red, and she brought the car to a gentle halt. "Mom?" Lily's humming paused. "Can I have one of your cookies after school? They smelled so good this morning." Sarah's throat tightened. "Of course, sweetheart." She forced brightness into her voice, though the words felt hollow. "You make the best cookies in the whole world," Lily declared with 9-year-old certainty. "Better than any store-bought ones. Even better than Mrs. Peterson's, and she owns a bakery." A car horn honked behind them, and Sarah realized the light had turned green. She pressed the gas pedal, trying to focus on the road instead of the burning shame that seemed to have settled permanently in her chest. The drive home seemed longer than usual. Each familiar landmark, the corner grocery store where they bought their weekly supplies on sale, the secondhand bookshop where Lily spent hours browsing, the park where they had their picnic lunches when the weather was nice, felt different now, tainted by Principal Edwards' judgment. Lily continued humming in the back seat, switching to a new tune, completely unaware of how her mother's world had tilted on its axis. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles turning white. She thought of all the nights she'd spent helping Lily with homework, all the birthdays she'd managed to make special despite their tight budget, all the time she'd volunteered at church events and neighborhood cleanups. "We want parents who represent the school well." The words stung fresh again. What did that even mean? That her clothes weren't expensive enough? That her job as a piano teacher wasn't prestigious enough? That being a widow somehow made her less worthy? Their small house came into view. The paint was fading in spots, and the garden wasn't as neat as some, but it was home. Sarah pulled into the driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under the tires grounding her somewhat. "Mom?" Lily's voice came again, gentler this time. "Are you okay? You're really quiet." Sarah caught her daughter's reflection in the mirror again. Lily's brown eyes, so like Michael's, were filled with concern. 9 years old, but sometimes so perceptive it hurt. "I'm fine, sweetie," Sarah managed, putting the car in park. "Just thinking about some grown-up stuff." "Is it about the fall festival? I saw you talking to Principal Edwards." Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned forward. "He doesn't smile very much, does he?" A surprised laugh escaped Sarah's lips, though it sounded more like a sob. "No, he doesn't." They sat there for a moment in the driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled. The plate of cookies waited silently beside her, each perfectly baked treat now seeming like evidence of her presumption. Who was she to think she could contribute anything worthwhile to Meadowbrook Elementary? "Time to go inside," Sarah finally said, reaching for her purse and the rejected cookies. Her voice was steady, but her hands still shook slightly as she gathered her things. Lily bounced out of the car, her backpack covered in bright cartoon characters swinging from her shoulders. Her ponytail caught the morning light, and for a moment, Sarah saw Michael in the way she tilted her head, in the slight curve of her smile. As they walked to the front door, Lily still humming her carefree tune, Sarah felt the weight of the morning pressing down on her shoulders. But she straightened her back and lifted her chin. just as she had done every day since Michael's death. She wouldn't let Principal Edwards' cruel words break her, not when she had this precious humming miracle depending on her. The key turned in the lock, and they stepped into their modest home. Lily skipped ahead to the kitchen, already talking about her upcoming art project, while Sarah carefully set the plate of cookies on the counter. She stood there for a moment, touching the checkered cloth she had so hopefully wrapped around them just hours ago. "Mom?" Lily called from the hallway. "Can I take some cookies for my lunch tomorrow, please?" Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Of course you can, sweetheart," she answered. And if her voice wavered slightly, Lily didn't seem to notice, already humming her way up the stairs to her room. The plate of chocolate chip cookies sat untouched on the kitchen table, their sweet aroma filling the small but tidy kitchen. Sarah Jennings stood at the window, her fingers absently tracing the worn wooden frame as she stared at the bird feeder Michael had hung years ago. The evening light caught the crystal wind chimes he'd given her on their last anniversary, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the walls. Behind her, the familiar click of the refrigerator door made her turn. Lily, still in her school uniform, pulled out a carton of milk. Her daughter's dark curls, so like Michael's, were coming loose from her morning ponytail. "Mom, can I have a cookie?" Lily asked, already reaching for the plate. "Of course, sweetie." Sarah's voice came out quieter than she intended. She watched as Lily took a big bite, crumbs falling onto the checked tablecloth. "These are really good," Lily said between mouthfuls. "I don't get why they didn't pick you to help at the festival. You make the best cookies in the whole world." Sarah's throat tightened. She turned back to the window, pretending to adjust the curtain. "Oh, they probably just had enough helpers already. But I heard Mrs. Thompson saying they needed more volunteers yesterday." Lily's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up. "And you're super good at organizing stuff. Remember my birthday party last year? Everyone said it was amazing." Sarah felt her daughter's small arms wrap around her waist from behind. The simple gesture of comfort nearly undid her. "Thank you, sweetheart," she managed. "Why don't you go start your homework? I'll call you when dinner's ready." Once Lily had disappeared upstairs, Sarah sank into Michael's old armchair. Their wedding photo sat on the side table, Michael's warm brown eyes seeming to look right through her. He wore that goofy grin she'd loved so much, the one that had made her say yes on their first date when he'd asked her to dance despite having 2 left feet. "What would you say about all this?" she whispered to the photo. Her fingers found the simple gold band she still wore. The memory of that terrible day 5 years ago swept over her. The police at her door, the words "car accident," and "didn't make it" blurring together. She'd been so lost in those first few months. But then the life insurance check had arrived, and with it, a chance to honor Michael's memory. He'd always talked about wanting to give back to their community, especially to help kids who loved reading as much as their Lily did. The decision to donate the money for the new library wing had been easy. Staying anonymous had felt right at the time. Michael had never done things for recognition. But now, sitting in their quiet house with Principal Edwards' dismissive words echoing in her head, doubt crept in. Sarah pushed herself up from the chair, wiping her eyes quickly as she headed to the kitchen. She couldn't let Lily see her crying. The ingredients for dinner sat untouched on the counter, but the thought of cooking made her stomach turn. "Lily," she called up the stairs, "how about we order pizza tonight?" Her daughter's enthusiastic yes brought a weak smile to her face. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah retreated to her bedroom. The day's emotions finally overwhelmed her, and she sank onto the edge of her bed. Tears rolled down her cheeks as Principal Edwards' words played on repeat in her mind. "We don't need unqualified people like you." The irony felt like a physical weight on her chest. The library where Lily spent countless happy hours wouldn't even exist without Michael's insurance money, without their family's sacrifice. She remembered the day they'd broken ground, how she'd stood at the back of the crowd, holding Lily's hand as the principal gave a speech about community support. Sarah's gaze fell on the small wooden cross hanging above her dresser. Michael had carved it himself, his hands steady and sure as they always were when he worked. He told her it was a reminder that sometimes the biggest blessings came wrapped in the hardest packages. Getting up, she walked to her window and looked out at the quiet street. A few houses down, the Harrisons' porch light was still on, probably waiting for their teenage son to come home. Across the way, Mrs. Chen's cat sat in the window, a familiar guardian of the night. This was her community, her home. Shouldn't she have a right to be part of it? Sarah knelt beside her bed, clasping her hands the way her mother had taught her long ago. "Dear Lord," she whispered, her voice shaky in the darkness. "I don't understand why things have to be so hard sometimes. I try to do what's right, to be strong for Lily, to honor Michael's memory." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I know my worth isn't in what others think of me, but—" her voice caught. "Sometimes it's so hard to believe that. Please give me strength. Show me what to do." The words felt small in the quiet room, like pebbles dropped into a vast ocean. Sarah stayed there for a long moment, listening to the distant sound of cars on the highway and the soft whir of the ceiling fan. She wondered if anyone could hear her heart's quiet plea for courage. Rising finally, she wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Tomorrow was another day. She had to be strong, if not for herself, then for Lily. But as she got ready for bed, Principal Edwards' cold stare and dismissive words still haunted her, making her wonder if her voice would ever truly be heard in the halls of Meadowbrook Elementary. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting warm squares of light across the breakfast table. Sarah stirred her coffee absently, the events from yesterday still weighing heavily on her mind. Across from her, Lily munched happily on her cereal, her legs swinging beneath the chair. "Mom, guess what?" Lily's eyes sparkled with excitement. "During reading time yesterday, Mrs. Thompson told us how lucky we are to have such a beautiful library. She said it's the nicest one in all the district schools." Sarah's hand froze mid-stir. The spoon clinked against the ceramic mug as memories rushed back signing papers in the lawyer's office. Michael's life insurance check clutched in trembling fingers, her quiet insistence that the donation remain anonymous. That's wonderful, sweetheart," Sarah managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said someone really kind must have helped build it." Lily continued, oblivious to her mother's reaction. "I wish I knew who it was. I'd give them the biggest thank you card ever." Sarah swallowed hard, pushing back the tears that threatened to spill. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "doing good things is its own reward. We don't always need recognition." "Like when you make cookies for Mrs. Martinez next door when she's sick?" Lily asked, scraping the bottom of her bowl. "Something like that," Sarah nodded, grateful for her daughter's simple wisdom. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine tasks, packing Lily's lunch, braiding her hair, double-checking homework. Sarah kept herself busy at home, cleaning and organizing, trying not to dwell on Principal Edwards' cruel words or the irony of being deemed unworthy by a school that literally stood on the foundation of her family's sacrifice. When afternoon came, Sarah arrived early for pickup, parking in her usual spot beneath the shade of an old oak tree. She stepped out of the car, enjoying the crisp fall air, when a familiar voice called out, "Sarah Jennings, is that really you?" Mrs. Elena Alvarez approached with her characteristic warm smile, her silver hair neat as always, wearing a bright purple cardigan that seemed to match her vibrant spirit. She had taught at Meadowbrook for over 30 years before retiring last spring, and generations of students, including Sarah herself, had loved her gentle wisdom and fierce dedication to her students. "Mrs. Alvarez," Sarah embraced the older woman. "It's so good to see you. I was just dropping off some books for the library," Mrs. Alvarez explained, then paused, noting Sarah's expression. "Dear, what's wrong? You look troubled." Something in the retired teacher's kind eyes broke through Sarah's careful composure. Before she knew it, words tumbled out about Principal Edwards, the volunteer rejection, the humiliation. Mrs. Alvarez's face darkened with each detail. "That man," she muttered, shaking her head. "But Sarah, why didn't you tell him about the library? About Michael's insurance?" Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "How did you—" "My dear, I was on the board when that anonymous donation came in." Mrs. Alvarez's eyes softened. "I recognized Michael's name on the paperwork. I've kept your secret all these years. But maybe it's time." "I can't," Sarah interrupted. "Michael wouldn't have wanted it used that way. He believed in quiet giving, in helping without praise." "And that's admirable," Mrs. Alvarez said firmly, placing a weathered hand on Sarah's arm. "But there's a difference between humility and hiding your light. This community, these children, they benefit every day from your family's generosity. You are the backbone of this place, even if they've forgotten." The dismissal bell rang, and students began pouring out of the building. Sarah spotted Lily's bright backpack in the crowd. "Think about what I said." Mrs. Alvarez squeezed her hand before turning to leave. "You have more strength than you know." Sarah climbed back into the car, watching Lily skip toward her through the rearview mirror. Mrs. Alvarez's words echoed in her mind. "You are the backbone of this place, even if they've forgotten." Lily hopped into the back seat, immediately launching into a story about her day. As Sarah pulled away from the curb, she glanced at the library wing, its large windows gleaming in the afternoon Sunday. For the first time since yesterday, she felt something beside pain, a small spark of something that felt almost like courage. The kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of Sarah's homemade lasagna as she and Lily sat down for dinner. The familiar scent usually brought warmth to their evening meals, but tonight it couldn't quite chase away the heaviness in Sarah's heart. She watched as Lily twirled pasta around her fork, her daughter's face scrunched in concentration. "Mom," Lily said suddenly, setting down her fork, "Jenny's mom is helping with the face painting at the festival, and Tommy's dad is bringing his cotton candy machine." She paused, pushing a piece of pasta around her plate. "How come you're not helping?" Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Well, sweetie, sometimes things are a bit complicated. But you make the best cookies in the whole world." Lily's eyes sparkled with pride. "Remember when you made those chocolate chip ones for my birthday last year? Everyone said they were better than store-bought ones." Sarah smiled softly, remembering how the children had gathered around the treats, their faces lighting up with joy. "That's very sweet of you to say, honey, and you're super good at organizing stuff too. You always help me clean my room and make everything fit just right." Lily took another bite of lasagna. "I bet you could make the festival really special." Something shifted inside Sarah as she watched her daughter's earnest face. The faith in Lily's eyes sparked a familiar warmth, the same feeling she'd had when Michael would encourage her to believe in herself. "You know what?" Sarah said, straightening her shoulders. "You're right. I can do something special." Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah pulled out her recipe box. Her fingers found the card for her grandmother's blueberry muffins, the corners worn from years of use. She spread the ingredients across the counter: flour, sugar, fresh blueberries, and vanilla extract. As she mixed the batter, her movements became more purposeful. Each stir was filled with determination, the kitchen filled with sweet scents as she baked batch after batch, letting the familiar motions calm her nerves about tomorrow. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. She carefully packed the still warm muffins into 2 baskets, covering them with cheerful red and white check cloths. Lily bounced excitedly beside her as they drove to school, the baskets secure in the back seat. "Can I help carry them, Mom?" Lily asked as they pulled into the parking lot. "Of course, sweetheart." Sarah handed her the smaller basket. "Just be careful. They're still a little warm." They walked through the school's main entrance, their footsteps echoing in the nearly empty hallway. It was early enough that most students hadn't arrived yet. Sarah's heart pounded as they approached Lily's classroom, but she kept her head high. Mrs. Thompson, Lily's teacher, was already at her desk when they knocked. Her surprised smile was genuine as she looked up. "Sarah, Lily, what brings you here so early?" "We brought something for the class," Sarah said, lifting the cloth to reveal the golden brown muffins. The sweet aroma filled the room instantly. Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened. "Oh my! These look absolutely wonderful." "They're Grandma's special recipe," Lily announced proudly. "Mom made them just for our class." As the students began arriving, their reactions made Sarah's heart swell. Their faces lit up at the sight of the fresh muffins, and the room filled with excited chatter. Even the usually quiet kids in the back row came forward, drawn by the warm treats. "These are amazing, Mrs. Jennings. Can I have another one, please? My mom never baked stuff like this." Sarah helped distribute the muffins, making sure every child got one. She watched as they savored each bite, some closing their eyes in delight, others licking crumbs from their fingers. Their joy was contagious, and she found herself smiling more broadly than she had in days. Mrs. Thompson touched her arm gently. "This was so thoughtful of you, Sarah. You've made their morning special." Sarah was about to respond when she caught movement in the hallway. Through the classroom window, she saw Principal Edwards walking past, his daily morning rounds right on schedule. Their eyes met briefly, and his expression darkened. Sarah gathered her empty baskets, saying goodbye to the children who called out their thanks, As she stepped into the hallway, Principal Edwards was waiting, his tall frame blocking her path. "Mrs. Jennings," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I believe I made myself clear about unauthorized volunteers." Sarah clutched the baskets tighter. "I was just bringing treats for my daughter's class. Let me be perfectly clear." He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You cannot force your way into this school's activities. We have standards to maintain." The warmth from the children's smiles moments ago seemed to evaporate under his cold stare. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she met his gaze, seeing the warning there. Without another word, Principal Edwards turned and walked away, his shoes clicking sharply against the polished floor. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, the empty basket suddenly feeling heavy in her hands. Through the classroom window, she could see the children still enjoying their muffins, their happiness a stark contrast to the ice in Principal Edwards' voice. She took a deep breath, trying to hold on to the joy she'd felt just minutes before, but his words had left a shadow she couldn't quite shake. Sarah pushed her shopping cart down the cereal aisle of Morton's grocery, her mind wandering to tomorrow's lunch preparations for Lily. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she reached for Lily's favorite cereal. That's when she heard them, two voices just around the corner, speaking in theatrical whispers meant to be overheard. "Did you hear about that Jennings woman?" The first voice carried clearly despite its hushed tone. "Showing up uninvited with those muffins? Oh, I know," the second voice replied. "She's obviously trying to buy her way into the school. So desperate." Sarah's hand froze mid-reach. Heat crept up her neck as she recognized the voices both belonged to mothers from Lily's school. Mrs. Peterson and Mrs. Blake, who always wore designer clothes to PTA meetings. "Principal Edwards told my husband she's been causing all sorts of trouble," Mrs. Peterson continued. "Apparently, she can't take a hint that she doesn't belong." Sarah's fingers trembled as she gripped her shopping cart. The cereal box she'd been reaching for suddenly seemed very far away. She wanted to round the corner, to defend herself, to tell them about Michael's gift to the school. Instead, she stood rooted to the spot, her chest tight with hurt and anger. "Well, you know what they say about people like that," Mrs. Blake added with a sniff. "Always trying to prove something." The sound of their heels clicking against the linoleum floor grew fainter as they moved away, but their words remained, settling like dust on Sarah's shoulders. She abandoned her half-filled cart in the aisle and hurried out of the store, desperate for fresh air. Back home, Sarah busied herself with dinner preparations, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, warming her back, but she couldn't shake the chill of those whispered words. Lily burst through the front door, her backpack thumping against the floor. "Mom, I'm home!" Her usual cheerful greeting was slightly subdued. Sarah turned from the cutting board, forcing a smile. "Hi, sweetie. How was school?" Lily slid onto a kitchen stool, her small fingers picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "It was okay." She hesitated, then added in a small voice, "But Amanda said something weird today." Sarah's knife paused over a half-cut carrot. "Oh?" she said. Lily's voice wavered. "She said you were desperate for attention." "That's why you brought muffins even though Principal Edwards didn't want you to." Lily looked up, her eyes wide with confusion. "That's not true, right, Mom?" The knife clattered against the cutting board as Sarah set it down. Each word felt like a physical blow. She'd known there might be consequences for standing up to Principal Edwards, but she hadn't expected them to reach Lily so directly. "Oh, honey." Sarah rounded the counter and pulled Lily into a tight hug. "No, that's not true at all. Sometimes people say unkind things because they don't understand." "Then why did Amanda say it?" "Sometimes kids repeat what they hear their parents say," Sarah explained gently, smoothing Lily's hair. "But that doesn't make it right or true." Lily buried her face in Sarah's shoulder. "I don't like it when people say mean things about you." Sarah's heart clenched. This was exactly what she'd feared, that her actions would make things harder for Lily. She opened her mouth to respond, but a knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Alvarez stood on their porch, holding a ceramic teapot and wearing a determined expression. "I thought you might need some company," she said, her warm brown eyes taking in Sarah's tired face. "And I brought my special chamomile blend." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes as she ushered the older woman inside. Mrs. Alvarez had always had an uncanny ability to show up exactly when needed. While Lily settled in the living room with her homework, Mrs. Alvarez bustled around the kitchen, preparing tea with the efficiency of someone who'd done it thousands of times. "I heard what those women were saying at the grocery store," she said quietly, setting a steaming cup in front of Sarah. Sarah's hands wrapped around the warm cup. "News travels fast in small towns, especially when it's nonsense," Mrs. Alvarez said firmly. She sat down across from Sarah, her presence solid and reassuring. "Sarah, listen to me. Your worth isn't determined by what those women whisper in grocery stores or what Charles Edwards thinks about you. But Lily needs to see her mother standing tall," Mrs. Alvarez interrupted gently. "She needs to learn that sometimes doing the right thing means facing unkind words with grace." Sarah took a shaky sip of tea. "I just don't want her to suffer because of me. What she would suffer from more is seeing her mother cave to bullies and gossip." Mrs. Alvarez reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "The truth has a way of rising to the surface, like cream in coffee. Your kindness, your generosity with the library, those things can't be erased by lies." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea and watching the sunset paint the kitchen walls golden. Mrs. Alvarez's presence acted like a balm, slowly easing the sting of the day's hurts. After Mrs. Alvarez left, Sarah went through their nighttime routine with Lily homework check, teeth brushing, and their nightly reading session. As she tucked Lily into bed, she pulled her daughter into an extra tight hug. "Mom?" Lily whispered into her shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart? I don't care what Amanda or anyone else says. I think you're the best mom ever." Sarah held her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't let Principal Edwards's rejection or cruel gossip define her. Her worth wasn't measured by their standards, but by the love she gave and received, by the difference she made in quiet ways, and by the truth she lived every day. Sarah stood at the kitchen counter, sorting through Lily's backpack while her daughter worked on homework at the table. The usual routine checking folders, signing permission slips, reading classroom updates. Her fingers brushed against a crisp envelope, official school letterhead gleaming under the kitchen lights. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet kitchen, making Lily look up from her math worksheet. "What's that, Mom?" Sarah's eyes scanned the formal text, each word hitting her like a physical blow. The letter was cold, clinical. "Dear Mrs. Jennings, due to recent incidents and concerns regarding appropriate boundaries, you are hereby prohibited from participating in any volunteer activities at Meadowbrook Elementary School. This includes, but is not limited to, classroom assistance, field trips, and school events." The words blurred as tears threatened to spill. Sarah set the letter down, steadying herself against the counter. She could feel Lily's curious gaze on her back. "Sweetie," Sarah managed, keeping her voice steady, "I need to run to the school for a quick meeting. Can you stay with Mrs. Peterson next door for a little while?" 20 minutes later, Sarah marched through Meadowbrook's empty halls, her footsteps echoing against the polished floors, the same floors her husband's insurance money had helped maintain. Her hands trembled, but she forced them still. The principal's office door loomed ahead, his nameplate gleaming. "Charles Edwards." She knocked firmly. "Come in," his voice carried through the door. Principal Edwards barely looked up from his computer as Sarah entered. His suit was perfectly pressed, his desk meticulously organized. Everything about him spoke of control and authority. "Mr. Edwards," Sarah began, holding up the letter. "I need to understand this." He finally turned to face her, his expression carved from stone. "I believe the letter is quite clear, Mrs. Jennings." "But why?" The word came out smaller than she intended. "I've done nothing wrong. I just want to be involved in my daughter's school life." "Mrs. Jennings," he stood, straightening his tie, "let me be direct. You're not good enough to represent this school. Period." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Sarah felt her chest tighten. "Not good enough?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is a prestigious institution. We have standards to maintain." He adjusted a pen on his desk that was already perfectly aligned. "Your background, your situation, it's not what we're looking for in parent volunteers." Sarah's hands began to shake again, but this time with anger. "My situation? You mean being a widow? Working hard to raise my daughter alone? Please don't make this difficult." His tone dismissed her like she was a troublesome child. The decision is final. Sarah stood there, feeling stripped bare. The library wing stretched out beyond his office window, the very one Michael's sacrifice had built. The irony tasted bitter in her mouth. "My daughter," she managed. "She shouldn't have to suffer because you look down on me. No one is suffering, Mrs. Jennings. Now, if you'll excuse me." He turned back to his computer, effectively ending the conversation. Sarah walked out in a daze, past the front office where she'd brought those hopeful cookies, past the bulletin board advertising the fall festival she couldn't help with anymore. Each step felt heavier than the last. The drive home was a blur. She barely remembered thanking Mrs. Peterson for watching Lily. Inside their modest house, Sarah headed straight for her bedroom, pulled open her bottom drawer, and lifted out Michael's old flannel shirt. The fabric was soft from years of wear. The blue and green plaid faded. It still held a hint of his scent, or maybe that was just her imagination. She pressed the shirt to her face, and finally let the tears come. They fell hot and fast, soaking into the familiar flannel. Everything she'd tried to build, all her efforts to stay strong for Lily, it felt like it was crumbling. "I miss you so much," she whispered into the shirt. "I don't know how to fight this alone." A small sound made her look up. Lily stood in the doorway, watching with concerned eyes. Before Sarah could wipe away her tears or try to smile, Lily padded over to her desk and pulled out a piece of paper and her favorite purple marker. Sarah watched through tear-blurred vision as her daughter's small hands moved across the paper. After a moment, Lily walked over and held out her note. In careful purple letters it read, "Mom, you're good enough for me." Sarah stared at those simple words, written in her daughter's uneven handwriting. The tears still fell, but something else rose in her chest, a warmth, a spark of strength she thought she'd lost. Lily climbed onto the bed beside her, small arms wrapping around Sarah's middle. Together, they sat in the quiet room, Michael's shirt between them, and those purple words shining like a beacon of hope. "I love you, baby," Sarah whispered, holding her daughter close. "Love you too, Mom," Lily murmured back, her head resting against Sarah's shoulder. "Want to read a book from the library? The one Daddy helped build?" Sarah looked down at the note again, those simple words from her daughter's heart. In that moment, she felt a seed of strength take root, nourished by Lily's unconditional love and unflinching faith in her mother. Sarah's alarm buzzed at 6 in the morning, but she was already awake. The morning sun painted thin stripes across her bedroom wall through the Venetian blinds. Instead of the heaviness that had weighed her down yesterday, a different feeling stirred in her chest. She couldn't quite name it, but it felt like hope mixed with determination. She got up and pulled on her favorite blue sweater, the one Michael always said brought out her eyes. In the kitchen, she prepared Lily's lunch with extra care, tucking a heart-shaped note inside that read, "You make every day brighter. Love, Mom." "Morning, sweetie," Sarah called as Lily shuffled into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her daughter's hair was a mess of tangles, but her smile was bright. "Can I have chocolate chip pancakes?" Lily asked, climbing onto her usual chair at the breakfast table. Sarah mixed the batter while humming an old hymn. "You know what, baby? Today feels like a chocolate chip kind of day." After breakfast, they drove to school. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves skittered across the parking lot. Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she pulled up to the drop-off lane, but she refused to let Principal Edwards's band dim her spirit. "Have a wonderful day, honey," Sarah said, giving Lily an extra squeeze. "Remember what I always say, kind hearts are the strongest hearts," Lily recited, then skipped toward the building. Sarah watched until her daughter disappeared through the heavy double doors, then turned her car toward First Methodist Church. Mrs. Alvarez was already waiting in the parking lot, a ring of keys jingling in her hand. "Ready to make some magic?" the retired teacher asked, her gray hair caught in the morning breeze. "More than ready," Sarah replied, helping Mrs. Alvarez carry boxes of canned goods from her car. The church basement was cool and musty, with concrete floors and fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. But as they worked, arranging folding tables and sorting donations, the space began to transform. Sarah hung cheerful signs while Mrs. Alvarez organized the food by category. "My husband Jorge always said every community needs a heart," Mrs. Alvarez remarked, stacking boxes of pasta. "Sometimes we just need to help it beat a little stronger." By noon, they had created neat rows of canned vegetables, fruits, and proteins. Sarah's old keyboard sat in the corner, polished and ready. She'd printed simple flyers advertising free piano lessons, and Mrs. Alvarez had already distributed them at the senior center where she volunteered. "We should call it Harmony House," Mrs. Alvarez suggested, stepping back to survey their work. "Food for the body, music for the soul." Sarah's eyes welled up. "That's perfect." The first visitors arrived shortly after lunch, a young mother with 3 children, looking nervous until Sarah's warm smile put them at ease. "Please," Sarah said, gesturing to the tables of food. "Take what you need. We're here to help." Throughout the afternoon, more families came. Sarah noticed some wore clothes from the same discount store where she shopped, while others drove newer cars but carried worried expressions that spoke of recent hardships. She greeted each one with the same genuine warmth. Between helping with food selections, Sarah gave her first piano lesson to 8-year-old Tommy, whose mother couldn't afford the music school in town. His small fingers stumbled over "Mary Had a Little Lamb," but his face lit up when he got it right. "You're a natural," Sarah encouraged, watching him beam with pride. Mrs. Alvarez handled the paperwork and organization, her teacher's efficiency keeping everything running smoothly. She'd created a simple system for tracking inventory and lesson schedules, making notes in her neat handwriting. By late afternoon, word had spread. A local grocery store manager stopped by, offering to donate their day-old bread and produce. 2 high school students asked about volunteering. Sarah's phone kept buzzing with text messages from parents interested in piano lessons. "Look at what you've started," Mrs. Alvarez said softly, watching Sarah show a young girl how to position her hands on the keyboard. "This is what community looks like." The basement had come alive with chatter and movement. Children practiced scales while their parents selected groceries. Elderly visitors lingered to talk, sharing stories and recipes. The space felt warm despite the concrete walls, filled with the kind of energy that comes from people helping people. At 5 o'clock, Sarah's last piano student left, and she began tidying up the music area. Her fingers were tired from demonstrating scales, and her voice was hoarse from talking. But her heart felt fuller than it had in weeks. Mrs. Alvarez insisted on finishing the cleanup alone. "Go home to Lily," she said, shooing Sarah toward the door. "You've done enough for one day." Driving home, Sarah passed Meadowbrook Elementary. The building looked different somehow. Smaller, less intimidating. She thought about Principal Edwards' ban and realized that while he could keep her out of the school, he couldn't stop her from serving her community. The autumn sun was setting as Sarah pulled into her driveway, casting long shadows across her small front yard. Her muscles ached from moving boxes and sitting at the keyboard, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from doing something worthwhile. Inside, Lily was finishing her homework at the kitchen table, watched over by their elderly neighbor who had agreed to help after school. The house smelled like the lasagna they'd left warming in the oven. "How was your day, Mom?" Lily asked, looking up from her math worksheet. Sarah hung her keys on the hook by the door, thinking about the faces she'd seen, the music she'd taught, the connections she'd helped create. "It was good, sweetheart," she said, wrapping her daughter in a hug. "Really good." As she set the table for dinner, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since receiving that awful letter of banishment. A sense of purpose, of building something meaningful again. She might not be allowed in the school, but she had found a different way to make a difference. The old keyboard in the church basement wasn't as grand as the piano in the school auditorium, and the concrete basement wasn't as impressive as the school's polished halls. But within those humble walls, she had helped create something beautiful. A place where everyone was welcome, where worth wasn't measured by titles or bank accounts, but by the simple act of showing up and caring. The Saturday morning sun warmed Sarah's driveway as she and Lily carried grocery bags from their old station wagon. Their neighbors had been dropping off donations all week long, and the car was stuffed full of canned goods and boxed meals. "Mom, look how many bags there are," Lily beamed, her small arms wrapped around a paper bag nearly as big as she was. "The church basement is going to be so full." Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she watched her daughter carefully navigate the steps. "Careful with that one, sweetie." "Here, let me help." She reached out to steady the bag. But Lily shook her head. "I can do it, Mom. Just like you're doing big things now." The simple faith in her daughter's voice made Sarah pause. She adjusted her grip on her own bags and followed Lily inside. Their modest living room had become a temporary storage space, with neat rows of donated items lined up against the walls. Mrs. Martinez from 2 doors down appeared at their screen door, carrying more bags. "Buenos dias, Sarah. I brought some more things." She stepped inside, her warm smile lighting up the room. And look who I found waiting outside. Behind her came Tommy and Lisa, 2 of Lily's classmates, clutching sheet music. "Can we practice piano today, Mrs. Jennings?" Lisa asked hopefully. "Our mom says it's okay." "Of course," Sarah said, her voice soft with gratitude. "Let me just get these bags sorted, and then we can start." As they organized the donations, more parents began dropping by. Mrs. Chen brought homemade dumplings for the hard-working volunteers. Mr. N. 1980A. Patterson, whose son had been struggling with math, stopped to thank Sarah for the after-school tutoring session she'd organized at the church. "You know," he said quietly, leaning against the doorframe, "Edwards gave my boy such a hard time last semester. Made him feel stupid." He shook his head. "But ever since your tutoring group started, Jimmy's grades are up." He's smiling again. Sarah folded an empty paper bag, touched by his words. "Everyone learns differently. Jimmy just needed someone to believe in him." Throughout the morning, more children arrived for piano lessons. Sarah's old upright piano, slightly out of tune but still beautiful, filled the house with scales and simple melodies. She moved between students, gently correcting finger positions and encouraging their efforts. Mrs. Thompson, usually so quiet at PTA meetings, lingered after dropping off her daughter Emma.
"I should have spoken up,"
she confessed, watching the children practice. "When Edwards banned you from volunteering, it wasn't right. Many of us knew it wasn't right." Sarah touched her arm gently. "It's okay. Sometimes it's hard to stand alone." "But you did," Mrs. Thompson said. "And look what's happening now." Indeed, Sarah's living room had transformed into something magical. While some kids practiced piano, others sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting donations into boxes. Lily moved between groups, offering cookies and juice, her face glowing with pride. More parents gathered in the kitchen, sharing coffee and stories. Sarah overheard snippets of conversation about Principal Edwards, his favoritism, his harsh words to struggling students, his dismissal of anyone who didn't fit his narrow view of success. "Remember when he wouldn't let the ESL parents host their cultural fair?" Mrs. Rodriguez said, stirring her coffee. "Said it wasn't appropriate for our school image." Sarah listened, realizing she wasn't alone in her pain. The community had been hurting under Edwards' leadership for years, but something was shifting now. People were finding their voices, coming together in her humble living room. By late afternoon, the piano practice had evolved into an impromptu sing-along. Children's voices rose in simple harmony, filling the house with joy. Parents who had come to drop off donations stayed to join in, and soon Sarah's home echoed with laughter and music. Lily sat at the piano bench between lessons, picking out the melody to Amazing Grace, the first song Sarah had taught her. The sight brought tears to Sarah's eyes as she remembered Michael teaching her that same song years ago. As the sun began to set, families gradually headed home, leaving behind a house full of warmth and memories. Sarah found thank you notes tucked between the sheet music, crayon drawings left on her coffee table, and enough casseroles in her fridge to feed them for a week. "Today was the best day ever," Lily declared as Sarah tucked her into bed that night. Her daughter's eyes were heavy with sleep, but her smile remained bright. "Did you hear everyone singing together, Mom?" "I did, sweetheart." Sarah smoothed Lily's hair back from her forehead. It was beautiful. Through the partially open window, she could hear children's voices drifting up from the street, still humming the songs they'd learned that day. The simple melodies carried on the evening breeze, a gentle reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting back, but from creating something new and beautiful instead. Sarah tucked the blanket around Lily's shoulders, watching as her daughter drifted off to sleep. The music from outside seemed to wrap around them like a lullaby, proof that even in the darkest times, harmony could still be found. The bells above the second-hand store's door chimed as Sarah and Lily stepped inside. The familiar scent of old books and well-worn clothes filled the air. Sarah squeezed Lily's hand gently as they made their way to the children's section, their footsteps echoing on the creaky wooden floor. "Let's find you something special for the fall festival performance," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice cheerful despite the ache in her heart. She ran her fingers along the rack of dresses, feeling the different textures, satins, cottons, and velvets in various states of wear. Lily's eyes lit up at a pale blue dress with small pearl buttons down the back. "Mom, look at this one." She held it up against herself, twirling around in front of the full-length mirror. The dress was a bit worn at the hem, but the color brought out the blue in Lily's eyes. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, checking the price tag. She did some quick mental math, relieved that it was within their budget. "Would you like to try it on?" As Lily disappeared into the changing room, Sarah browsed through the racks nearby. Her fingers brushed against a formal blazer, the kind the other moms would wear while volunteering at the festival. She quickly pulled her hand away, pushing down the familiar feeling of exclusion. "Mrs. Jennings," a voice called out behind her. Sarah turned to find a woman she didn't immediately recognize. "I'm Amanda Torres. You helped my family at the food pantry last week." Sarah's face softened with recognition. "Of course. How are your boys doing?" "So much better thanks to you." Amanda's eyes grew misty. "The groceries helped, but it was your kindness that meant the most. You didn't just hand us food. You listened. You cared." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Amanda shook her head firmly. "Not everyone would. Some people look right through us, especially at school events. But you saw us." Before Sarah could respond, Lily emerged from the changing room, the blue dress floating around her like a cloud. "Mom, does it look okay?" "You look like a princess," Amanda said, smiling at Lily. Sarah knelt to adjust the dress, her fingers working on the pearl buttons. "It fits you perfectly, sweetheart. Turn around for me." As Lily spun, the dress swishing around her legs, her smile faltered slightly. "I wish you could see me perform at the festival," she said quietly. "Mrs. Mitchell says all the parent volunteers get special seats right up front." Sarah's hands stilled on the buttons. The weight of Principal Edwards' band pressed heavily on her shoulders. Amanda looked between them, confusion crossing her face. "I heard about what happened at school," Amanda said softly. "People are talking about it at the food pantry. It's not right, what they're doing to you." Sarah stood up, smoothing her hands over her jeans. "Sometimes life isn't fair," she said, trying to keep her voice steady for Lily's sake. "But that doesn't mean we stop being kind or doing what's right." Lily turned to face her mother, her small fingers playing with the dress fabric. "But Mom, all the other kids' parents will be helping. Even Jenny's dad is volunteering, and he never comes to anything." Sarah knelt down again, taking Lily's hands in hers. She could see the hurt in her daughter's eyes, the same hurt she felt every time she had to drive past the school without stopping to help. "Lily, sweetheart, look at me. I promise you, I will be there in the audience. I wouldn't miss your performance for anything in the world. Promise?" Lily's voice wavered. "Cross my heart," Sarah said, making the gesture that always made Lily smile. "I'll be sitting right there, watching you shine in this beautiful dress. And afterward, we'll have our own special celebration at home." Amanda touched Sarah's shoulder gently. "You know, Mrs. Jennings, my boys talk about your piano lessons all the time. They say you make them feel like they can do anything." Sarah blinked back tears, grateful for the unexpected support. "Music has a way of bringing out the best in people. Just like you do," Amanda said firmly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "My sister works at the community center. They're always looking for people to teach after-school programs. Maybe you could bring your music there?" Sarah took the card, turning it over in her hands. Even as one door had closed, others seemed to be opening. She tucked the card into her pocket and turned back to Lily, who was still admiring herself in the mirror. "Should we get this one?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from the way Lily's eyes sparkled. "Yes, please." Lily hugged her mother tightly. "And Mom? Even if you can't volunteer, you're still the best mom ever." Sarah held her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "Thank you, sweetheart. Now, let's get you changed so we can pay for this dress." As Lily went back to the changing room, Amanda squeezed Sarah's arm. "You're showing all our children what real strength looks like, Mrs. Jennings. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Sarah watched as Lily emerged with the dress. The gymnasium of Meadowbrook Elementary hummed with energy. Colorful paper streamers hung from the ceiling, and handmade posters decorated the walls. Parents filled the metal folding chairs, their excited chatter mixing with children's laughter and the squeak of basketball shoes on the polished floor. Sarah slipped in through the back doors, her heart pounding. She chose a seat in the last row, hoping to blend into the shadows. Her hands fidgeted with the simple blue dress she'd chosen for the evening. Lily had insisted she dress up, even though she wasn't volunteering. "You look pretty, Mommy," Lily had said before running off to join her classmates. Now, watching the children gather at the front of the gym, Sarah spotted her daughter's bright yellow dress among the sea of students. Lily stood straight and tall, practicing the song they'd rehearsed at home. The sight brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Principal Edwards strode onto the makeshift stage, his expensive suit catching the fluorescent lights. He tapped the microphone, calling for attention. "Welcome to our annual Fall Festival," he announced, his voice carrying that familiar note of authority. "We are honored to have Mayor Thompson with us tonight." Sarah's stomach clenched as she watched Edwards gesture to the mayor, who sat in the front row. She'd seen the mayor at church sometimes, though they'd never spoken directly. He was a stocky man, with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair. The festival program began with the kindergartners singing, "You Are My Sunshine." Parents cooed and took pictures, while older siblings rolled their eyes. Sarah found herself relaxing slightly, caught up in the simple joy of the moment. Then Mayor Thompson took the stage. He adjusted his tie and smiled at the crowd. "Friends and neighbors," he began, "our little town has always been special because of its people. Tonight, I want to talk about someone who exemplifies the spirit of Meadowbrook." Sarah half listened, her eyes fixed on Lily, who would be performing soon. But the mayor's next words snapped her attention back to the stage. "Many of you might not know this, but our beautiful school library was built through the generosity of one family," Mayor Thompson continued. "The Jennings family donated the entire sum needed for construction, asking for no recognition." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarah felt her face grow hot as several heads turned, searching the audience. "But that's not all," the mayor went on. "Sarah Jennings has continued to serve our community quietly and faithfully. The new food pantry at First Methodist has helped dozens of families. Her free piano lessons have brought music into homes that couldn't afford it otherwise." Principal Edwards stood at the side of the stage, his face reddening. He stepped forward, trying to catch the mayor's eye. But Thompson kept speaking. "Sarah," the mayor called out, "would you please come forward?" For a moment, Sarah couldn't move. Her legs felt like lead. But then she saw Lily beaming at her from the children's section, small hands clasped together in excitement. Slowly, Sarah stood. The crowd parted as she made her way to the front, whispers and smiles following her path. "This woman," Mayor Thompson said, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder, "represents the best of our town, not because of her status or her bank account, but because of her heart." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous wave. Sarah blinked back tears as she saw Mrs. Alvarez in the crowd, clapping and nodding proudly. Other parents she knew from the food pantry stood up, adding their voices to the celebration. Principal Edwards remained frozen at the edge of the stage, his usual commanding presence diminished. Sarah caught his eye for a brief moment and saw something she'd never expected: uncertainty. "The library will now bear a plaque honoring Michael Jennings," the mayor announced. "And the school board has unanimously voted to welcome Sarah back as a volunteer, effective immediately." This time, the children joined the applause, led by Lily's enthusiastic jumping and clapping. Sarah's vision blurred with tears as she heard scattered calls of, "Thank you, Mrs. Jennings," from the crowd. When the program ended, parents and teachers surrounded Sarah, sharing hugs and kind words. Some apologized for believing rumors, while others asked about volunteering at the food pantry. Through it all, Sarah kept looking for Lily, who finally broke through the crowd and launched herself into her mother's arms. "You're crying, Mommy," Lily said, touching Sarah's wet cheek. "Happy tears, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, holding her daughter close. "Just happy tears." The drive home was quiet, streetlights casting warm glows through the car windows. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror at Lily, who had fallen asleep clutching her festival program. Her daughter's face looked peaceful, a small smile still playing on her lips. Sarah's heart felt lighter than it had in years. The weight of silence, of hiding her contribution, of bearing others' judgment, it all seemed to float away into the autumn night. She wasn't just Michael's widow anymore, or the struggling single mom. Tonight, she was simply Sarah Jennings, recognized not for what she had, but for who she was. The Monday morning after the festival was crisp and clear. Sarah guided her car into the drop-off line at Meadowbrook Elementary, noticing how parents huddled in tight clusters near the entrance. Their whispered conversation stopped abruptly when she passed. Some avoided eye contact entirely, while others stared with poorly concealed curiosity. "Have a wonderful day, sweetheart," Sarah said, giving Lily's hand a gentle squeeze. Her daughter's smile brightened the car interior before she hopped out, her backpack bouncing with each step. Through her rearview mirror, Sarah watched two mothers lean close to each other, their heads bent in conversation. One pointed subtly in her direction. The gesture made Sarah's stomach twist. She'd seen that behavior before, right before Principal Edwards had banned her from volunteering. The workday dragged by at the small accounting firm where Sarah processed payroll. Her mind kept drifting back to those whispering parents. When her phone rang at 2:15 p.m., her heart dropped at the sight of the school's number. "Mrs. Jennings?" The secretary's voice was carefully neutral. "You need to come to the school immediately. There's been an incident involving Lily." Sarah's hands trembled as she gathered her purse. Her supervisor took one look at her face and nodded. "Go. Family first." The drive to school felt endless. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Was Lily hurt? Sick? She parked haphazardly and rushed into the main office, where she found her daughter sitting alone on a plastic chair, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. "Baby, what happened?" Sarah knelt beside her, gathering her daughter's small hands in her own. Lily's face was streaked with tears. Her usual brightness dimmed. "They said I cheated," Lily hiccuped. "But I didn't, Mommy. I promise I didn't." Before Sarah could respond, Principal Edwards emerged from his office. His suit was perfectly pressed, his smile razor-thin. "Mrs. Jennings, please step into my office. Lily, stay right there." The principal's office felt colder than usual. Sarah perched on the edge of a leather chair while Edwards settled behind his massive desk, making a show of opening a file folder. "Your daughter was caught cheating on her mathematics test this morning," he stated without preamble. Mrs. Peterson noticed suspicious behavior and found this. He slid a crumpled paper across the desk, a sheet of multiplication tables with smudged pencil marks. "That's impossible," Sarah said firmly. "Lily would never cheat. She studies hard, and she loves math." Edwards leaned back, steepling his fingers. "The evidence suggests otherwise. Given the seriousness of academic dishonesty, we're looking at a possible suspension." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Suspension? For a fourth grader? Based on what evidence?" Mrs. Peterson saw her looking at something under her desk. When confronted, Lily became defensive, a clear sign of guilt. "Or maybe she was scared." Sarah's voice rose slightly. "She's 9 years old, and her teacher accused her of something she didn't do." Edward's expression hardened. "Mrs. Jennings, your recent publicity at the fall festival doesn't grant you special privileges. Rules apply to everyone, even if some parents think they're above them." The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't about Lily at all. This was Edward striking back at her through her child. The realization made her nauseous. "I want to speak with Mrs. Peterson," Sarah demanded, "and I want to see this test." "Mrs. Peterson has gone home for the day," Edwards replied smoothly. "And the test is confidential. We'll be conducting a full investigation, of course. In the meantime, Lily will need to leave school premises immediately." Sarah stood up, her legs unsteady. "This isn't over." "No," Edwards agreed, his tone almost pleasant. "It isn't." Lily was exactly where they'd left her, small and vulnerable in the too-big chair. Sarah helped her gather her things, keeping her voice gentle despite the rage building inside her. Other parents in the office watched their exit, their expressions a mix of pity and judgment. The drive home was silent, except for Lily's occasional sniffles. Sarah kept glancing in the rearview mirror, her heart breaking at the sight of her daughter's bowed head. Lily had always loved school, had been so proud of her good grades. Now this. At home, Sarah watched as Lily trudged upstairs to her room, leaving her backpack in a heap by the door, so unlike her usual careful habits. The sound of her bedroom door closing echoed through the quiet house. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, her legs finally giving out. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, catching the dust motes in its golden light. Michael's photo smiled at her from its place on the wall, and Sarah had never felt his absence more keenly. Her hand shook as she tried to pour a glass of water. The reality of her situation crashed over her in waves. Edwards was willing to hurt an innocent child to maintain his power. He'd found her weakness, the one thing she couldn't bear to see harmed, and had struck without mercy. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Sarah stared at her hands, splayed on the familiar wooden table, the same table where she and Lily did homework together every evening. Tears splashed onto the surface, and she didn't bother wiping them away. For the first time since Michael's death, Sarah felt truly helpless. She'd weathered poverty, grief, and countless small humiliations, but watching her daughter suffer for her actions was unbearable. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders until she could barely breathe. Upstairs, she heard Lily's muffled crying through the floor, and each sob was like a knife to her heart. Sarah remained at the kitchen table, her untouched glass of water growing warm in the afternoon light, as shadows lengthened across the floor. The porch light cast a soft yellow glow across Sarah's weathered deck chairs, barely illuminating the photograph she held in trembling hand. It was her favorite picture of Michael, taken at the auto shop where he'd worked, his face smudged with grease but wearing that bright, unstoppable smile. The same smile Lily had inherited. "I don't know what to do anymore," Sarah whispered to the photograph, her voice catching. The evening air had grown chilly, but she barely noticed. "They're hurting our little girl now, Michael. All because I tried to stand up for myself." She traced Michael's face with her finger, remembering how he'd always known exactly what to say when things got tough. How he'd take her hand and tell her that kindness was never wasted, even when it felt that way. But now, with Lily facing suspension over false accusations, Sarah felt lost. The wooden porch swing creaked slightly in the breeze. Fallen leaves skittered across the floorboards. And somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Sarah pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, fighting back tears. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she continued softly to Michael's picture. "The food pantry, the piano lessons. I was trying to build something good, just like you always wanted. But now," she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, "now, I'm just making everything worse for Lily. Maybe Principal Edwards was right. Maybe I should just know my place." The screen door squeaked behind her. Sarah quickly tried to compose herself, but Lily had already seen her tears. The 9-year-old padded across the porch in her fuzzy sock feet, her own eyes red-rimmed from crying earlier. "Mama?" Lily's voice was small but steady. "Are you talking to Daddy?" Sarah nodded, trying to smile. "Just asking him for some advice, sweetie. You should be in bed." Instead of going back inside, Lily crossed to where Sarah sat and wrapped her thin arms around her mother's shoulders. The gesture was so tender, so protective, that Sarah felt her composure crack again. "I'm so sorry, baby," Sarah whispered into her daughter's hair. "I never meant for any of this to hurt you. I should have just stayed quiet. Kept my head down." "No." Lily's voice was surprisingly firm. She pulled back to look at her mother, her young face serious in the porch light. "You taught me to do the right thing even when it's hard. Don't stop now." Sarah stared at her daughter, struck by the wisdom in those words. They were her own words, repeated back to her countless times over breakfast tables and bedtime talks. Words about standing up for what's right, about choosing kindness even when it costs something. "But they're trying to get you in trouble," Sarah protested weakly. "They're saying you cheated." "I didn't cheat," Lily said simply. "And you didn't do anything wrong either. You just helped people, like Daddy would have wanted." Sarah's breath caught. Lily rarely spoke about Michael, but when she did, it was always with such certainty, as if she knew exactly who he had been, even though she'd been too young to remember him. "The library has Daddy's heart in it," Lily continued, settling onto the porch swing beside Sarah. "That's what Mrs. Alvarez told me. She said sometimes people forget to be kind, but that doesn't mean we should forget too." Sarah looked down at the photograph in her hands, then at her daughter's determined face. She saw Michael in the set of Lily's jaw. In the unwavering way she faced what was right. The truth hit Sarah like a wave. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Lily's right to grow up believing in justice, in standing up for what's right, in the power of kindness to change things. "They think they can scare us," Sarah said slowly, finding her voice growing stronger. "They think if they threaten you, I'll back down and go away quietly." Lily nodded, leaning against her mother's shoulder. "But we're not scared, are we, Mama?" Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter, drawing strength from Lily's simple courage. The photograph of Michael seemed to smile up at them both, and Sarah felt something settle in her chest, a certainty she hadn't felt since this whole mess began. She wiped her tears with new purpose, straightening her shoulders. The time for hiding was over. Michael had given everything so their daughter could have a better life, and Sarah wouldn't let anyone take away Lily's right to be proud of who she was, who they were as a family. "No, baby," Sarah said, her voice clear and steady now. "We're not scared, and we're not going to let them pretend we don't matter." She tucked Michael's photo carefully into her cardigan pocket, right next to her heart. Tomorrow, she would take this fight public. She would speak up not just for herself, but for every parent who'd ever been made to feel less than, every child who'd been unfairly judged, every person who'd been told to stay quiet and accept injustice. Lily squeezed her mother's hand. Together, they sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, two hearts beating with the same quiet determination. The night air had grown cooler, but Sarah no longer felt the chill. She felt only the warmth of her daughter's faith in her, and the steady flame of resolve burning in her chest. The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Church Hall, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden floor. Sarah sat at a folding table, her hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee. Mrs. Alvarez stood at her side, greeting parents as they filtered in through the heavy wooden doors. "I wasn't sure anyone would come," Sarah whispered, watching as familiar faces filled the rows of chairs. Mrs. Alvarez squeezed her shoulder. "You've touched more lives than you know, mi querida." The hall buzzed with quiet conversation as more than 24 parents settled in. Sarah recognized faces from her food pantry, mothers whose children took piano lessons, and even a few teachers who had slipped in quietly through the side door. "Thank you all for coming, Mrs. Alvarez began, her voice carrying the same authority it had held during her teaching days. "We're here because injustice cannot go unchallenged. Principal Edwards has crossed a line." A mother in the front row raised her hand. "My daughter told me what happened to Lily. It's obvious he's targeting her because of Sarah." "That's right," another parent added. "My son was in the same math test. Lily's never cheated a day in her life." Sarah's eyes welled with tears as parents began sharing stories about the food that had appeared on their doorsteps during hard times, the confidence their children had gained through piano lessons, the quiet ways she had helped without asking for recognition. Mrs. Alvarez pulled out a thick binder. "The school board meets next Tuesday. We need to present our case formally." She opened to a blank page. "Let's document everything." For the next 2 hours, parents lined up to write their testimonies. Teachers quietly shared their observations of Edward's behavior. Someone brought up the library donation, and the room fell silent. "Is it true?" asked Tom Parker, whose son attended Sarah's piano lessons. "You're the anonymous donor who funded the library wing?" Sarah nodded slowly. "It was Michael's insurance money. He always believed education could change lives." "That's over $500,000, someone whispered. "We didn't want recognition," Sarah explained, her voice soft but steady. "We just wanted to help." Mrs. Alvarez stood up straighter. "And that's exactly why you deserve to be heard now. This isn't about recognition. It's about justice." They organized into committees. Some would gather more testimonies, others would research school policies. A legal secretary offered to help format their presentation. "Remember," Mrs. Alvarez cautioned, "we stay professional. No angry outbursts, no personal attacks. We present facts and let the truth speak for itself." Sarah watched in amazement as her community mobilized. Janet from the grocery store typed meeting minutes. Bill, whose daughters took piano lessons, offered to make copies. Even shy Mrs. Thompson volunteered to speak at the board meeting. "Your kindness created this," Mrs. Alvarez said quietly to Sarah. "All these people? They're here because you showed them what community really means." As the meeting wound down, parents lined up to hand Sarah their written testimonies. Each letter told a story of kindness given freely, of dignity restored, of hope shared in dark moments. "We're with you," said Mary Chen, pressing a thick envelope into Sarah's hands. "All the parents from my daughter's class signed letters." Sarah carefully placed each testimony in a manila folder, handling them like precious things. These weren't just papers. They were pieces of trust, fragments of faith in something bigger than fear. "Tuesday at 7, Mrs. Alvarez reminded everyone. "Dress professionally. Speak calmly. Show them what real leadership looks like." As people filed out, many stopped to hug Sarah or squeeze her hand. The air hummed with purpose, with the electricity of people united in a cause they believed in. Sarah gathered her things slowly, still processing the morning's events. Mrs. Alvarez helped her stack the chairs, their familiar rhythm of working together comforting in its simplicity. "Are you ready for this?" Mrs. Alvarez asked gently. Sarah looked down at the folder in her hands, thick with support, heavy with truth. "I have to be," she said, "not just for Lily, but for every child who needs to know that kindness matters more than power." As Sarah walked to her car, the folder of testimonies pressed against her chest like a shield. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the door, but her heart felt steadier than it had in days. The weight of truth was heavy, yes, but not as heavy as the burden of silence had been. She placed the folder carefully on the passenger seat, touching it one more time to make sure it was real. All those stories, all those voices ready to stand with her. The drive home stretched ahead, and though her nerves flickered with anticipation, hope had taken root alongside them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah pushed her shopping cart down the cereal aisle of Mason's grocery. Her mind wandered to the growing stack of supporter letters on her kitchen table. Each one represented a parent brave enough to stand with her against Principal Edwards. "Just get milk and bread," she reminded herself, checking her worn leather wallet. Money was tight this month with all the time she'd been spending organizing instead of taking extra piano students. The wheels of her cart squeaked as she turned into the dairy section. She reached for a gallon of milk when a familiar voice cut through the quiet store like ice. "Mrs. Jennings." Sarah's hand froze mid-reach. Principal Edwards stood there in his press suit, looking severely out of place among the milk cartons and yogurt containers. His face was tight, with barely controlled anger. "You're destroying everything we've built at Meadowbrook," he said, his voice carrying across the store. "Turning parent against parent, spreading discord." Sarah's cheeks burned as other shoppers stopped to stare. Mrs. Peterson from the PTA clutched her shopping basket closer, while Mr. Roberts from 2 streets over pretended to be deeply interested in comparing cottage cheese labels. "I'm not destroying anything," Sarah said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just want what's fair for all our children." "Fair?" Edward stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking on the linoleum. "You're dividing our school community with your attention-seeking stunts. Those food drives, the piano lessons, it's all just a ploy for sympathy." A small crowd had gathered now. Sarah saw phones being pulled out, knew this confrontation would be all over social media by dinner time. Her hands trembled as she gripped her cart handle. "Those stunts help families who need it," she managed to say. "Just like the library that my husband's—" She stopped herself, still struggling to claim that legacy publicly. "The library?" A woman Sarah recognized as Trevor's mom from Lily's class stepped forward, her face twisted in contempt. "There she goes again, trying to take credit for everything good at the school. That's enough." The sharp voice belonged to Dan Martinez, whose daughter took piano lessons from Sarah. He moved to stand beside her, grocery basket still in hand. "Sarah's done more for this community in the past month than you've done in years, Edwards." The store seemed to split down the middle. On one side, parents who believed Edwards' accusations glared and whispered. On the other, familiar faces from the food pantry and piano lessons gathered supportively around Sarah. "She teaches my Amy piano for free," called out Mrs. Thompson from the back. "My girl never would have learned otherwise. She's just trying to buy influence," someone else muttered. "This is exactly what I mean," Edwards said, gesturing at the divided crowd. "Look at what you've done to our community, Mrs. Jennings. Are you proud of yourself?" Sarah felt dizzy. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the whispers too loud. She looked at the faces around her, neighbors she'd known for years now, choosing sides like children at a playground game. This wasn't what she'd wanted, not at all. "I think you should leave," Dan said firmly to Edwards. "You're the one making a scene in a grocery store." Edwards straightened his tie, his face flushed. "The board will hear about this," he said to Sarah. "Every bit of it." He turned sharply and strode away, leaving a wake of tension behind him. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the damage was done. Sarah could feel the invisible lines drawn between neighbors, between friends. Some offered quiet words of support as they passed, while others deliberately turned away. She abandoned her shopping cart and hurried to her car, hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive home passed in a blur of doubt and fear. When she walked through her front door, Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework. One look at Sarah's face, and her daughter was on her feet. "Mom? What happened?" Sarah sank into a chair, her voice wavering as she described the confrontation. "Maybe I should just stop," she whispered. "Look at what this is doing to everyone, to our neighbors." Lily came around the table and wrapped her arms around her mother's shoulders. "Remember what you told me about the library? How Dad always said books bring people together?" Sarah nodded, reaching up to hold her daughter's hand. "Well, you're bringing people together too," Lily said firmly. "The good kind of together. And if some people don't like it, that's their problem. But the division in the community was already there," Lily interrupted with the simple wisdom of a child. "Principal Edwards just didn't want anyone to talk about it. But you made people talk, Mom, and now they're choosing what's right." Sarah turned in her chair to look at her daughter. This remarkable girl who somehow always knew exactly what to say. "When did you get so wise?" Lily grinned. "I learned from you." Her face grew serious. "We'll fight together, Mom. Me and you and Mrs. Alvarez and all the people who know you're doing good things. We're stronger together." Sarah pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. The grocery store confrontation still stung, but Lily's words soothed the worst of the pain. Together, they would face whatever came next together. The gymnasium of Meadowbrook Elementary felt smaller than usual, packed with what seemed like half the town. Metal folding chairs creaked under the weight of concerned parents, teachers, and community members. The school board members sat at a long table on the raised platform, their faces stern under the harsh fluorescent lights. Sarah's hand trembled as she gripped Lily's smaller one. Her daughter squeezed back, offering silent support from their seats in the front row. The familiar smell of floor wax and old rubber balls couldn't mask the tension hanging thick in the air. Principal Edwards strode to the podium, his expensive suit pristine as always. His shoes clicked against the wooden floor, the sound echoing off the walls. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat, commanding attention with practiced ease. "Members of the board, concerned citizens," he began, his voice smooth as polished marble. "I stand before you today, deeply troubled by the actions of one individual who threatens the very fabric of our school community." Sarah felt eyes boring into her back. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her spine straight. Mrs. Jennings lacks the qualifications and standing to represent Meadowbrook Elementary. Her persistent attempts to force her way into school activities have created division and discord. Edwards gestured broadly. "She disrupts our procedures, circumvents proper channels, and now attempts to rally opposition against school leadership." Whispers rustled through the crowd like dry leaves. Sarah's throat tightened, but Lily's warm hand kept her anchored. "Furthermore," Edwards continued, "her daughter's recent academic misconduct. That's enough." Mrs. Alvarez's voice cut through the gymnasium like a bell. The retired teacher rose from her seat 3 rows back, her silver hair gleaming under the lights. "I've sat quiet too long, watching you twist the truth." Edward's face darkened. "Mrs. Alvarez, this isn't your time to—" "Oh, it's exactly my time." Mrs. Alvarez moved to the center aisle, her sensible shoes squeaking on the floor. "Board members, you need to know the truth about Sarah Jennings." She turned to face the crowd, her voice strong and clear. "That library wing where our children read every day? Sarah's late husband's life insurance built it. She donated every penny, asking nothing in return, not even recognition." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gymnasium. Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes as Mrs. Alvarez continued. While Principal Edwards was busy polishing his image, Sarah started a food pantry that feeds 15 families in our community. She gives free piano lessons to children who could never afford them. She bakes for every classroom party, helps with homework after school, and never asks for credit. Parents began standing up, one by one. A mother near the back called out, "Sarah's piano lessons gave my Tommy something to be proud of." "Her food pantry helped us through my husband's layoff," another voice added. "She tutored my daughter when we couldn't afford help," came another testimony. The momentum built as more people rose to speak. Teachers shared stories of Sarah's quiet contributions. Parents described her kindness to their children. Even the lunch lady stood to tell how Sarah always thanked her by name and asked about her family. Principal Edwards gripped the podium, his knuckles white. "These emotional appeals don't change the fact that we have standards." "Standards, Mrs.?" Alvarez's voice crackled with indignation. "Sarah Jennings has shown more integrity, compassion, and dedication to this school than you've demonstrated in your entire tenure." The board members leaned together, whispering urgently. The crowd's energy had shifted, the tension now directed at Edwards rather than Sarah. Sarah felt Lily tugging at her hand. "Go on, Mom," her daughter whispered. "Tell them." Standing on shaky legs, Sarah made her way to the podium. Edwards stepped back, his face flushed with anger. She gripped the wooden edges, drawing strength from its solidity. "I never wanted recognition," she began softly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "When Michael died, I knew he would have wanted to help build something lasting for our community. The library was his dream, a place where every child could discover the joy of reading regardless of their background." She took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces. "I may not have a fancy degree or the right connections, but I love this school. I love these children. I love this community." Her voice wavered but held firm. "And even if you reject me, that won't change. Because that's what community means, standing together, helping each other, believing in each other, even when it's hard, even when some people tell you you're not good enough." Sarah's eyes met Edward's cold stare. "I won't stop loving this community, even if you reject me. Because that's what Michael taught me, what I'm teaching Lily, and what I believe in my heart. Love and kindness matter more than status or power." The gymnasium fell silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Lily's face shone with pride in the front row, and Mrs. Alvarez nodded encouragingly from her place in the aisle. The silence in the gymnasium pressed against Sarah's ears like cotton wool. She returned to her seat beside Lily, her legs wobbling slightly. The board members huddled together at their table, heads bent in intense discussion. Their whispers carried no meaning across the space, but Sarah could see their serious expressions, the occasional sharp gesture. Principal Edwards stood rigid by the podium, his usual composure cracking around the edges. His tie hung slightly askew, and a faint sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead under the harsh gymnasium lights. Lily's small hand found Sarah's again, warm and reassuring. "You did great, Mom," she whispered, but Sarah could barely hear her over the thundering of her own heart. The minutes stretched like taffy. Parents shifted in their metal chairs, the squeaks and creaks echoing off the walls. Mrs. Alvarez remained standing in the aisle, her presence a quiet bulwark of support. The lunch lady dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. A young mother bounced a fussy baby against her shoulder, the soft shushing sounds carrying through the tense air. Sarah's mind raced through every possible outcome. Would they side with Edwards? Would Lily face retaliation? Had she just made everything worse? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Finally, the board members straightened in their chairs. The chairwoman, Mrs. Thompson, adjusted her reading glasses and cleared her throat. The sound cut through the gymnasium like a knife, and every head snapped to attention. "After careful consideration of the testimony we've heard tonight," Mrs. Thompson began, her voice steady and clear, "and review of additional documentation regarding Principal Edwards' conduct, this board has reached a decision." Sarah's fingers tightened around Lily's. She felt Mrs. Alvarez's hand rest supportively on her shoulder. The evidence presented demonstrates a clear pattern of discrimination and misconduct on the part of Principal Edwards. Mrs. Thompson's gaze swept the room. His treatment of Mrs. Jennings, his attempt to use her daughter as leverage, and his deliberate suppression of community involvement are all serious violations of our district's policies and values. A collective intake of breath filled the gymnasium. Edwards' face drained of color. Therefore, effective immediately, Charles Edwards is removed from his position as principal of Meadowbrook Elementary School. The gymnasium erupted. Gasps of shock gave way to cheers and applause. Parents jumped to their feet, some crying, others hugging. The sound was deafening, bouncing off the walls and high ceiling in a cascade of joy and relief. Edwards stumbled back from the podium as if struck. "You can't," he started, but his voice was lost in the celebration. Sarah sat stunned, tears streaming down her face. Lily threw her arms around her mother's neck, squeezing tight. "You did it, Mom! You really did it!" Parents surged forward, surrounding Sarah with hugs and congratulations. The lunch lady wrapped her in a tear-filled embrace that smelled of chocolate chip cookies. Teachers she'd never spoken to pressed her hands, thanking her for standing up. A group of students from her piano lessons started singing one of their practice songs, their young voices adding to the joyful chaos. Mrs. Alvarez made her way through the crowd to pull Sarah into a fierce hug. "I knew you had it in you," she whispered. "Michael would be so proud." The mention of her late husband broke something open inside Sarah. She began to weep openly, years of held-back tears finally flowing freely. These weren't tears of sadness or shame, but of relief, joy, and vindication. Lily pressed close against her side, and Sarah pulled her daughter tight against her heart. "I love you so much, sweetie," she managed through her tears. "I love you too, Mom," Lily replied, her own eyes shining. "I knew you were good enough. I knew it all along." The celebration swirled around them like a warm tide. Parents who had once avoided eye contact now approached with warm smiles and outstretched hands. Children darted between the adults, their excitement adding to the electric atmosphere. The board members stepped down from their platform to shake Sarah's hand, Mrs. Thompson specifically thanking her for her courage in coming forward. Through her tears, Sarah held Lily close, their hearts beating in sync. In that moment, all the doubt, all the pain, all the lonely nights wondering if she was enough, it all washed away in the wave of love and support surrounding them. The truth had finally come to light, and it had set them all free. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Meadowbrook Elementary, casting warm patterns across the freshly polished floors. Sarah Jennings walked through the entrance, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The familiar scent of books and floor cleaner mingled in the air as she made her way down the main hallway. Teachers stepped out of their classrooms to greet her, their smiles genuine and welcoming. Mrs. Thompson, the fourth-grade teacher, rushed forward to give her a quick hug. "We've missed you, Sarah. It's so good to have you back." Sarah's eyes moistened as she nodded. "Thank you. It means more than you know." As she approached the library entrance, she saw Mrs. Alvarez waiting by the double doors, her silver hair neatly styled and her kind eyes twinkling. The retired teacher reached out and squeezed Sarah's hand. "Ready, dear?" Inside, the library buzzed with quiet activity. A small group had gathered, teachers, staff members, and several parents who had supported her through the ordeal. Near the circulation desk, covered by a velvet cloth, stood what Sarah knew to be the memorial plaque. Her daughter Lily bounced on her toes next to the new interim principal, Dr. Martinez, who had replaced Edwards. The woman's warm smile put Sarah at ease as she approached. "Mrs. Jennings," Dr. Martinez said, extending her hand. "Today we right a wrong and honor a legacy that should have been celebrated long ago." Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she shook the principal's hand. She glanced around at the familiar shelves, remembering how empty this space had been before Michael's insurance money had filled it with books and learning resources. The morning sun filtered through the high windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. "Would you like to do the honors?" Dr. Martinez gestured to the covered plaque. Sarah's throat tightened. She looked at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. "Together," Sarah whispered, holding out her hand to her daughter. They stepped forward, mother and daughter, their fingers finding the edge of the velvet cloth. With a gentle pull, they revealed the gleaming bronze plaque mounted on the wall beside the library entrance. The words stood out in raised letters, clear and proud. "The Jennings Family Library dedicated to Michael Jennings, whose legacy continues to inspire." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. Lily pressed against her side, small arms wrapping around her waist. The gathered crowd broke into soft applause, but Sarah barely heard them. She was lost in memories of Michael, his laugh, his dreams, his unwavering belief in the power of education to change lives. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the library. "Michael Jennings may not have had fancy degrees or prestigious titles, but he understood something more important, the value of giving back to your community. His sacrifice, through Sarah's quiet stewardship, has touched countless young lives." Several teachers nodded in agreement. Sarah noticed some of her piano students in the crowd, standing with their parents. One little girl clutched a piece of sheet music to her chest, beaming up at Sarah. Dr. Martinez addressed the gathering. "This library stands as a testament to the Jennings family's generosity and vision. But it's more than just books and shelves. It's a reminder that true worth isn't measured by status or wealth, but by the impact we have on others. Sarah stepped closer to the plaque, her fingers hovering over the cool metal surface. The morning light caught the polished bronze, making the letters shimmer. She thought of all the children who had passed through these doors, who would discover new worlds and possibilities among these shelves. Michael would have loved that. Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, can I say something?" Sarah nodded, stepping back as her daughter faced the small crowd. Lily's voice was clear and strong, just like her father's had been. "My dad built this library because he believed in helping others, and my mom taught me that same lesson by never giving up, even when people were mean to her. I'm really proud to be a Jennings." Fresh tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she pulled Lily close. Around them, the gathered community members wiped at their own eyes. Dr. Martinez gestured to the refreshments table that had been set up near the reading nook. "Please, everyone, help yourselves. Let's celebrate this moment together." As people moved toward the refreshments, Sarah remained by the plaque. She ran her fingers over the raised letters of Michael's name, feeling the solid permanence of it. Closing her eyes, she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. For Michael's love, for Lily's strength, for the community that had finally embraced them fully. "Thank you," she murmured, her palm resting flat against the cool bronze. "Thank you for showing us the way." The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, warming her face as she stood there, at peace with the past and hopeful for the future. Michael's legacy would live on, not just in the books that filled these shelves, but in the hearts of all those who understood that true worth came from what you gave, not what you had. The afternoon sun bathed the Meadowbrook Elementary Library in golden light. Rows of familiar faces filled the chairs that had been arranged between the towering bookshelves. Sarah sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, watching as Lily approached the small podium that had been set up near the new brass plaque. Her daughter wore a blue dress they'd found at the second-hand store, the one Sarah had carefully ironed that morning. Lily's dark hair was tied back with a ribbon that matched, and her eyes sparkled with determination as she unfolded a piece of paper covered in her careful handwriting. Mrs. Alvarez gave Lily an encouraging nod from her seat near the window. The retired teacher's eyes were already glistening with tears, and she reached over to squeeze Sarah's hand. Lily cleared her throat and began to read, her clear voice carrying through the hushed library. "Kindness is like the books upon these shelves, a gift we choose to share beyond ourselves. My daddy built this place with love so true, through Mommy's heart, his spirit carried through. When others said she wasn't good enough, she showed me how to stay both kind and tough. For courage isn't loud like thunder's roll, but quiet strength that anchors in the soul." Sarah's vision blurred with tears as Lily continued, her daughter's words painting pictures of hope and perseverance. She thought of all the moments that had led to this day, the rejection, the whispered rumors, the dark nights when she'd questioned everything. But here was her daughter, standing tall, speaking truth with the simple wisdom of a child's heart. The new library director, Mrs. Chen, stepped forward when Lily finished, leading the applause that filled the room. "The Jennings Family Library," she announced, gesturing to the plaque, "will stand as a reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how quiet, creates ripples that touch countless lives." Children who had been sitting cross-legged on the storytime rug began to explore the library space, their excited whispers echoing off the high ceiling. Sarah watched as a small group gathered around the piano in the reading nook, the same piano she'd used to give free lessons during the darker days. Tommy, one of her piano students, sat down and began to play a simple melody she'd taught him. Other children joined in, some singing, others swaying to the music. The scene brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes as she remembered how music had helped heal her own heart after Michael's death. Parents mingled near the refreshment table, where Sarah's homemade cookies sat alongside store-bought treats. There was no distinction now, no judgment, just community sharing food and fellowship. Even some of the parents who had once avoided her eye were now smiling, their children playing together among the stacks. "Mrs. Jennings?" A small voice drew her attention. It was Emily, one of Lily's classmates. "Can you help me find a book about butterflies? My mom says you know this library better than anyone." Sarah stood, taking Emily's hand. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's look together." As they walked toward the nature section, other children joined them, forming a small parade through the aisles. She heard snippets of conversation around her. Remember when she helped with my science project? My mom says she's the one who started the food pantry. Did you know she teaches piano for free? The whispers were different now, not harsh or judgmental, but filled with appreciation and warmth. Sarah realized that her worth had never depended on anyone's approval. It had been there all along, in every act of kindness, every moment of persistence, every choice to love despite the cost. Lily appeared at her side, slipping her small hand into Sarah's.
Mom, can we show them the special reading corner?
Her daughter's eyes shone with pride, no longer shadowed by shame or doubt. Together, they led the group to a cozy nook where Michael's old reading chair sat, reupholstered and surrounded by beanbags. A photograph of him hung on the wall, his kind smile watching over the space he'd helped create. Your daddy would be so proud of you, Sarah whispered to Lily, pulling her close. He'd be proud of you too, Mom, Lily whispered back. You never gave up. The afternoon light began to soften, casting long shadows through the windows. Parents gathered their children, but not before stopping to thank Sarah, to share a memory, to express appreciation for what she'd brought to their community. Mrs. Alvarez approached with her familiar warm smile. Ready to head home, dear ones? Sarah looked around the library one last time, at the children sprawled on beanbags with books, at the piano still ringing with simple melodies, at Michael's picture watching over it all. This place was more than just a room full of books. It was a testament to love's quiet power to transform hearts and build bridges. Yes, she said, squeezing Lily's hand. Let's go home. As they walked toward the exit, the remaining families formed an impromptu line on either side of their path. Someone started clapping, and soon the sound filled the library. Not loud or showy, but steady and sincere, like the beat of a grateful heart. Sarah and Lily stepped out into the warm evening light, their shadows stretching long across the sidewalk. Behind them, the library glowed like a beacon, and the sound of applause followed them into the sunset. They walked hand in hand, surrounded by the love of a community that had learned to see with new eyes. Lily hummed one of the songs from her piano lessons, and Sarah joined in softly. Their voices blended together in the gathering dusk, carrying a melody of hope forward into whatever tomorrow might bring. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Sarah Jennings, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.